Welcome back. All right, so panic index time. Now, I've done this different. I know, I've got all 32 logos on the board. Good night, everybody. No, what I've done is I've arranged them in terms of points percentage from team that's first, being Boston, to team that's 32nd, which is Chicago. Columbus not far behind, and Anaheim is 30th. But going through by points percentage really gives you an idea of, where your contenders might be, might not be, and it doesn't necessarily reflect how teams are playing right now. But I wanted to do it this way, and I want to go through, and first I want to talk about which teams belong on the top row. Which teams I think, there's no reason for any kind of panic. Everything's going pretty darn well. We'll start with Boston, because Boston, I don't see any reason they wouldn't be in the top row. None. Things are going really well. They haven't lost in regulation at home. They have a game tonight against Seattle. That could very well be a game that they lose in regulation at home, because Seattle also belongs on the top row. Seattle, with their winning streak, has shown that the expectations they would fade were misfounded or misguided, maybe. The one thing with Seattle is they're very hot and cold. So this is a team that's on a hot streak after a cold streak, and I mean, there's the possibility it can go back the other way. We've talked a lot this season about teams being streaky. Seattle is one of those examples. If I can figure out a measurement on which teams are the streakiest this year, I will probably do a video on that as well, because it does seem to be that certain teams are prone to getting on these winning streaks and then they're just off again. So those two are on the top row. Of the rest of the teams that are here, I think Kings fans right now have to be pretty darn happy. They've come up and they've tied the Vegas Golden Knights. Now, Vegas has games in hand. LA's played more games than most everybody else, but they've won enough that they're first in their division right now. And so that is something to be celebrated. Absolutely, something to be celebrated. So we've got three teams in the top row. Let's go down to the panic side of things. So on the panic side of things, of course, you've got your standard panic, and then you've got this right here. I've explained this before, this being the dude magnet. Well, it's more chill. If you haven't watched The Big Lebowski, by all means go and watch it, and then come back and watch the rest of this movie, or this video. This isn't a movie, it's a video. I'll figure it out. But at any rate, teams that are chilling, just waiting for the draft, because this season is done. Chicago belongs in that category. I don't think there's any panic with Chicago. I think that for the Hawks, we knew that they were going to be bad, so them being 32nd in points percentage, kind of by design. Columbus, on the other hand, while they should be in this category, the problem is they did go out, they got Gaudreau. There's reasons to look at Columbus and think, why didn't this get better? A lot of injuries for them. So I'm actually going to kind of chicken out a little bit and have Columbus right in between the panic and the acceptance. I think that's what's going to be going on here, is we're halfway between, where there's a lot of fans that may already be in this. I'm chill. We'll see if we end up getting Bedard in the draft, to fans that say, wait, this season was supposed to be better. Even with the injuries, the question could be asked, if they were healthy, would they be good enough for the playoffs? And I could see there being quite the debate on that. I don't think they would make the playoffs if they were healthy. They'd be a heck of a lot closer, though. Anaheim belongs right down here, too, right next to Chicago, because they weren't expected to be a playoff team either. There's no reason to think there's any panic with Anaheim fans. I would also counter that Arizona fans, no reason to panic there. Now, I'm not going to have them on this part of the board because they've lost 6 in a row in regulation. So, yeah, for Arizona, and they've started losing games at home as well. So for Arizona, the idea that maybe they could pull off the very unlikely and end up being in the hunt for the playoffs, that looks to be done. But hey, it's been a fun season. For Arizona, they got the Mullet Arena, which I know there's people that are still trying to dunk on it, but I think Mullet Arena is fine. It's a temporary stopgap. It's not a permanent building. We've seen teams play in temporary stopgap buildings before. It is a unique situation, sure, absolutely, but it's necessary, right? It's necessary, and it's short-term pain for long-term gain. And according to the team, they're making more money right now than they were when they were in Glendale. San Jose has to be down here too, right? Like, these four teams have to be totally chill with what's going to happen, and they're waiting for the draft. These are four teams that would love to have Bedard. San Jose would absolutely love to have a premier, fantastic, top-notch forward. That while I like Couture and I like Meyer, and Meyer's been scoring at a ridiculous rate, but they could really use Bedard, right? They could really use that bona fide superstar player, which now after the World Juniors, the hype is real. Montreal also in that same position. No reason to think that for Montreal this wasn't part of the plan. So, of the teams with the lowest points percentage, of the bottom six, Columbus is the only one that I'm not thinking, well, this is okay. This is kind of what was expected. San Jose, Arizona, Anaheim, Chicago, Montreal, all part of the plan this season, and not many expected them to be better. So then we come up to Vancouver. Vancouver is still in panic. Every day there's new panic. Right now, of course, the discussion is that OEL might be a healthy scratch, and yet Bruce Boudreau said, and yet he's still likely our best defenseman. To which I will agree with fans saying Quinn Hughes exists, and he's the best defenseman. But yeah, for Vancouver, they were supposed to be better. Now, whether or not they were supposed to be in the playoffs is a bone of contention, but they at least weren't supposed to be like this. This season has been a complete disaster. So to round out the bottom row, we'll get into Ottawa. Ottawa, I don't think it's a full-blown panic, but I mean, they're not going to be above the line for all that's good and bad and all that in the world. So I'm going to put them right there. I'm going to put them near the panic, not as near as Vancouver. Vancouver's kind of made peace with the daily panic in its fan base. And so, yeah, that's where I'm going to put those there. Now we'll go back to the top. Let us discuss Toronto. Toronto, no reason to think there's any panic right now with Toronto. They lose here and there, that's fine. I don't think there's any reason to be panicked with Toronto. They do have one of the better points percentages in the NHL. So again, for Toronto, I think top row is where they belong. Now, Carolina is where things are a little different. I'm going to put Carolina right here. Carolina over the last couple of weeks has looked vulnerable. Now, I've also discussed how you're going to see teams that have really good records that struggle in January. You're going to see teams with lousy records that might get better in January. January is, I've heard it many times referred to as kind of the dog days of the season because you're so far out from the start of the season. You're not that far away from the All-Star break, so you might already be thinking about the All-Star break. And you're too far out from the playoffs to really be focused on the playoffs. So it is that time of year where teams might be having a hard time with being as focused on the task at hand. And if their opponents are more desperate than they are, and that may very well be what we're seeing with Carolina, I still expect them to get themselves back into form and doing pretty well. I'm going to put New Jersey on the same level. Now, what's interesting is New Jersey, I would put them up here, except there have been enough losses over the last, 12 games? I would say 6 losses in the last 12, something around there, that there would still be some concern that might prevent them from being in that top row. You guys can let me know why I'm wrong in the comment section below. That's why that's there. This is not considered to be as serious as the power rankings for certain. Although I'm sure that when this started, there'll be people go, is this power rankings? Nope. It'd be great if I just started power rankings and went, and here's the board and good night. And done. But yeah, New Jersey, maybe someday. So for New Jersey, I still think they're a playoff team. Saying that a couple weeks ago, I'm sure that raised some eyebrows, but I've never really wavered on that. I still think they've got a good enough roster to be a playoff team. I would have some concerns with their goaltending in the playoffs for being unproven and all of that, but really, if New Jersey makes the playoffs, that's what Devils fans are going to care about right now. For Dallas, I'm going to put Dallas in the top row. I know that any concerns I have with Dallas when it comes to their inconsistency may just be from being a fan of the team and being a little bit overcritical at times. But yeah, they're first in the division. They're 3 points ahead of Winnipeg. They're playing well. They've won 7 of their last 10. No reason to have any panic there. Vegas. I'm going to put Vegas in the same row as Carolina and New Jersey because it feels like they're on the verge of getting on a roll, and then it doesn't really quite happen. And so for Vegas, who are now tied at the top of the division with the LA Kings, who I have above them on this panic index, it's been a bit of a different season for Vegas. They're much better on the road than they are at home, and they need to make sure that they continue to turn that around. And while they're turning around their play at home, they can't have their play on the road suffer. That's the other tricky part. They can't have their play on the road suffer. Tampa Bay, I don't see any reason for Tampa Bay not to be happy right now. Yeah, the road trip last week wasn't great, but this is a team that's won 2 Stanley Cups, and they've been in the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row. This team, I don't think there's any reason to have any panic when it comes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Winnipeg. Winnipeg, I think, probably belongs in this row as well. Not at the top, but right here. The loss against Detroit, and just, I don't know, there's some things with Winnipeg right now where they seem kind of sloppy. And again, it may very well be those middle of the season blues that a team can get into. Not the St. Louis Blues, but just blues in general. And so, yeah, Winnipeg, I'll throw them into that row. And I'm sure people will watch this and go, wow, he's throwing them all in the same row. Well, the teams that have the high points percentages should be above the line. Should be above the line, and almost always will be. So, I'll finish out here, and then we'll go back down here. The New York Rangers, I don't see any reason why the Rangers would have panic right now. I'll put them here, not at the top, not exuberantly happy, but sure, happy. Why not? So we'll come down here. I want to talk about the Colorado Avalanche for a bit. So the Avalanche I'm putting below the line, and I'm putting them below the line for a reason. Yes, they're still dealing with a lot of injuries, but they've got some guys back, and they're still losing. And it seems like the team's play somehow got worse with the return of Nathan MacKinnon, which has to be concerning. And it's just, there's moments like against Florida the other night, they could have won that game. Probably should have won that game. All right, we can also say if they were healthy, they probably would have won that game as well. But they're finding ways to lose games. They're losing to teams that they should beat. And I'm saying that even with the injuries, there's teams they should still be able to beat with the lineup they could put together. So there has to be some concern. Nashville. Nashville, I'm going to put above the line, not completely, because like they're above it, but not in this range. For Nashville, it's been a tough go of it, and now they seem to be turning things around. Even with the loss last night against Toronto, it's not like they got blown out. It's not like they were badly outplayed throughout the whole game, and it's not like Saros is showing any signs of slowing down when it comes to him stopping the pucks. This is a team that now is getting A-plus level goaltending, and A-plus level goaltending can get you into the playoffs. So for Nashville, even though they're below the playoff line, I have them above this one because if they keep trending in this direction, they will make the playoffs. Which brings me to Edmonton. Edmonton, they win last night. Yep, big win. But they're still losing enough that I think there should likely be some consideration for their spot on this list. I'm putting them below the line. The concerns about the defense are there. The concerns about the goaltending are there. And just some hot and cold play by some pretty key players. I think for the Oilers, I think that below the line is where they belong right now. Buffalo. Now, Buffalo had a couple of losses this week, so I can't put them in the very, very top row. I can also say I'm not going to put them in this row either. But for Sabres fans, I'll do you a solid. I'm going to leave you guys above the line, a little bit above the line, in that despite those losses, Buffalo's still in better shape than they have been in a long time. And I think they are going to find a way to turn this around and get it going. Now, they can't let it become an 8-game losing streak again. They have another 8-game losing streak. This season's done. But for Buffalo, they're not really completely out of it yet. And that's saying a lot because it's January. And I can't remember the last time where in January, other than the weird 2020-2021 season where it was all in 2021. But other than that season, I can't remember in January saying, Buffalo's still in this. And even that season, it was pretty obvious they weren't going to make it because that was the stacked Eastern division that they were in. Pittsburgh, I'm putting Pittsburgh below the line. Pittsburgh did have the big victory. They came back against Vancouver. Vancouver's right here. Pittsburgh, there are still some concerns with Pittsburgh. They win games they need to against Arizona, against Vancouver. But they're definitely a team that's in some danger because the Islanders aren't that far below the line. And as I mentioned, Buffalo's been playing well despite their recent couple of setbacks. So I'm going to put Pittsburgh a little bit below the line there because there's some pressure on them to win this year. Minnesota, I'm going to put Minnesota right here. A couple of setbacks recently for them as well to keep them out of the top row. But for Minnesota in general, there's no reason to really be concerned. I really still think this is a team that finishes top 3 in the division. I still think they're a risk to end up finishing first in the division as well. There is, of course, the risk they miss, but I don't think that happens. So for Minnesota, I'm still pretty gung-ho on them in general. Washington, I think Washington right now, I think things are pretty good. where they have one regulation loss in their last. I want to say their last 11. I think it's their last 10. I think it's their last 11 too. But if they have two regulation losses in their last 10, and then they have one regulation loss in their last 11, they're Wizards, not Capitals. So, which is the other Washington team, and they don't play basketball. But for the Caps, getting Ovechkin over that line and past Gordie Howe, so he's only got Gretzky to worry about, seems to have helped his game. Seems to have helped the team as well. And not only that, but when he was chasing Gordie Howe, it felt like teams were just obsessed with not being the team that gave up that goal that had him pass Howe, and that freed up other guys to get goals. So Washington, pretty solid overall run so far, and they definitely look like they're going to make the playoffs. For the Islanders, I'm going to put them below the line. I'm going to put them with Pittsburgh, Edmonton, and the Colorado Avalanche. In that, for the Islanders, they're dealing with a situation now where the numbers are trending in the wrong direction. They're not winning often enough, and their overall points percentage isn't where you would want it to be if you're going to finish top 8 in the East. So yeah, I'm going to put them below the line, just barely, but they're below it. Calgary, Calgary's tough. They're getting points. They're getting a lot of points in games they don't necessarily win. And so that's my issue with Calgary. Like, look at their road record. 7-7-7. You can say to somebody, well, Calgary's only lost 7 out of 21 games in regulation on the road. That sounds good. You can also say they've only won 7 out of 21 games on the road. That doesn't sound as good. It's bizarre. So with Calgary, I don't want to chicken out. I don't want to put them on the line. I feel like it's chickening out by putting a team on the line with how I've set this up this week, where I've got everybody, and I want to make sure that I'm putting them in the right spot. I'm going to put Calgary below the line. I'm going to put them in the same spot as Edmonton. Basically, the province of Alberta, you're dealing with panic with both. Not a lot. Vancouver's got that basically to themselves, I think. Is that how this is going to work? Yep. This could end up happening where Vancouver's the one that's down. That would be accurate. But yeah, Calgary, not a fantastic run for them overall, I don't think. But again, I know people will point out how they're not losing in regulation. All I can answer with, they're not winning enough for me either. St. Louis, I'm going to put St. Louis a little bit above the line for the same reason as Nashville. St. Louis is trending in the right direction right now. And Binnington's game has picked up. And it's funny because, people defended him when basically Berube said, play the net and don't worry about the rest of it. But he's been doing that. And I think it's helped his game, and I think it's helped the team as well. So I think St. Louis is trending in the right direction. They're going to make it tough because you've got two Alberta teams here that are supposed to make the playoffs. But if St. Louis and Nashville keep playing the way they do, and if we don't see any kind of slowdown from Seattle, LA, or Vegas, there is no home in the playoffs for Alberta, which would make it really tough for them to dunk on Canucks fans. That's the real thing that's at risk here. If you're an Oilers or a Flames fan, you don't want to be in the same position as a Canucks fan. So whatever it takes, right? Detroit, I'm going to put Detroit down here. They shouldn't be, but they are. And I'm saying they shouldn't be for a simple reason. Detroit is a good young team. They have a lot going for them. They're also a year away. And that's something that I felt before the season started. And while they were playing well at certain points during the season, I still felt like they didn't have what you need to be top 8 in the East. The East is very, very tough to get into the top 8. And so for Detroit, I don't think there's any shame in the season they're having. I would love to put them in this region. I think for Red Wings fans, they wanted more this year. And so the panic is there. Them and Ottawa being in the same spot honestly makes a lot of sense since both teams were supposed to get better. Their fans were excited. These teams are trying to come out of a rebuild, and that can be a tough task. The good news is Yzerman's in charge in Detroit, and I trust him as a general manager. It's very rare that he makes a move that doesn't make sense. So there you go. Florida, although I know Ben Sherratt will get mentioned in the comments as a reason to start doubting him a little bit, but I'm not there yet. Florida, I'm going to put Florida here. Now, I know Florida seems to be trending in the right direction, but we've seen this before. So they win the game against Colorado, but they're still 6 points out of the playoffs, and they've won 4 of their last 10. If Florida doesn't make the playoffs, that would be like just baffling. I do not understand because I've seen people say they're a fraud. I've seen people say, well, they were overrated. Florida, man for man, if you look at that lineup, both up front, on the blue line, you look in net, there's no reason they shouldn't be a playoff team. At the very least, I'm not saying first, second, or third necessarily in a division, but at least a wild card. And what we've seen from Florida this year is a team that shows glimpses of that team from last year. If you want to put it on Paul Maurice, absolutely you can. You want to put this on Bill Zito, you can do that as well. But this is a team that was supposed to be better than what they are. And so I have them below the line. Which means we're ending with Philly. Which makes some sense because Philly's baffling right now. So Philly wasn't supposed to be in the hunt. Philly was supposed to be down here. And not that long ago, Philly was down in this region of waiting for the playoffs, draft lottery. But because John Tortorella is good at his job, it means I don't know where to put the Philly magnet. Because you're not going to panic right now. The team's won, 6 out of 7? I don't know how happy fans are right now in Philadelphia. Like, it feels like watching Philly games is funny because they can be ahead 2-3-0. But as soon as that power play is struggling, the boos come out. And it's like, okay, seriously, you can't boo every power play. Oh, it's Philly. They can. I mean, part of me says they belong there, right? The Philadelphia, for their season so far, I could bring them up to here. But weren't they supposed to be in on Bedard? And if they don't get Bedard, if they don't get a top pick this year, will this season be seen as a failure? Like, let's say that Tortorella gets them enough wins to finish 4 points out of the playoffs. They have a really strong second half and they finish 4 points out of the playoffs. Is that a wasted season for Philadelphia? Is that a good season for Philadelphia? What does the picture look like going forward? Like, I have a lot of questions with Philly. So I think that's the right spot for them. I think. Because I'm not going to put them up here because it doesn't feel like there's optimism that the playoffs could be in the offing for them. At least not yet. They have to make this streak last a lot longer. But I can't put them in the panic region and I can't put them in the, well, we'll wait till the draft because they're winning a bunch of games right now. They're passing teams. And they're within single digits of a playoff spot. So, I mean, it's there. So let me know your thoughts. If you're a Flyers fan, how are you feeling about the run they've been on lately? Let me know your thoughts about any of the teams on the board. I just wanted to do it a little different today. So there you go. We have a number of teams above, a number of teams below, and I'm happy about it. I think this worked out pretty well. So going by points percentage to distribute everybody from 1 through 32 and then go from there is fun. And if you want to pretend that at the beginning was the power rankings, sure, cool, go for that. That's fine, that's good too. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing right through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Sorry to my phone, I just hit my phone. That's fine. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. As always, I will talk to you again soon.